Hello guys, so I am back with another chapter. I'm actually hoping to get this one out on the same day as chapter 4 or maybe a little after, just to kind of space it out a little bit. But we are finally getting into the nitty gritty, so I'm really excited for this one. I really hope I can do this scene the cinematic justice it deserves. But for this one, there is going to be an audible trigger warning. So I'm gonna try to insert the sound post-editing. We will insert the sound here. So yeah, that sound will play before and after the segment is finished. If it's too loud or too quiet, or you have a suggestion on a sound that you think would suit the content better, please let me know. This is honestly just a sound I looked up really quick on Google. But yeah, I hope you guys enjoy, and I really hope I can do this scene the cinematic justice it deserves. So yeah. Perfect Sun by That One Guy with That One Ship. Read by Munchin on Muchiko. Chapter 5, Aether Sun. Lily and Gladian had been taking refuge in the professor's lab since escaping the paradise, and while Gladian was most certainly thankful for the hospitality, he was eager to move on. He'd been insisting they leave Alola for a while now, and even though Lily hadn't disagreed, she avoided the subject. Cookie had a boat, but it wouldn't get them to the mainland Unova, and even though Gladian went on about having plenty of contacts, he didn't ever do anything with them. "We've been going in circles," Gladian said, scratching Type Null's neck one hot evening. He wouldn't let Null do it himself because there was a chance he'd lacerate itself with its talons. "Lily, I'll work something out. I promise. We'll make it out of here. We'll spread the message. We have to take our mother down." Lily didn't reply. She was cuddling Nebby close to her chest, and the cosmog made small noises as it playfully tried to break free. Type Null watched it with little interest. It made a moaning sound, choked by the eternals of its mask. Nebby glanced at it and calmed down. "Lily, you know that we have to do this, right?" "I know, Gladian. I know we do." Nebby escaped her arms suddenly and rushed towards Type Null, the two gaseous limb-like protrusions from Nebby's core of wispy purple placed excitedly on Type Null's helmet. It huffed as if sneezing and shook Nebby off, pawing at it, eyeing the cosmic curiously. "Calm down, Null," Gladian commanded, and the chimera lay back with a pained hiss. "Nebby?" Lily called after it, and the little Pokemon zipped back to her, waving to Type Null before leaving its side. Null raised a talon in acknowledgement. "What about Sun's Pokemon?" Gladian sighed irritably. "Why do you talk about Sun so much?" He didn't want to be reminded of Sun's death constantly. Lily bowed her head, hiding her face from her brother. "I'm worried about him." "Then believe he's dead and stop worrying. We need to keep our heads clear," Gladian said, covering his own expression with his hand dramatically. "I don't want him to be dead. Arceus, I wish that I could think he's alive, but I believe he is dead." "Gladian, don't..." Lily choked, and he realized his sister was crying. "Don't I..." "I'm sorry, Lily," Gladian apologized quickly, but he stopped himself. "I'm sorry."
"Hey kids!"
It was Cookie's voice. "Yeah?" Gladian called back down. "What is it?" Cookie's voice was less enthusiastic than Lily was used to. It was another reminder of the grim reality they'd fallen into after Gladian, Sun, and Hao's attempt to rescue her and Nebby.
We're eating in a minute, if you two want to come down.
Okay, thanks, Lily interrupted Gladian's response, knowing that he'd want to just be a recluse. Come on, Gladian, she said, and took her brother's hand. Let's eat with them tonight. The siblings climbed down from the lab's loft, Gladian reluctantly. Type Null left down after them, landing on its front legs and scratching the laminate flooring. Bennett winced. Nebby floated after the synthetic creature. Cookie cast a gaze at the masked quadruped and then looked at Gladian.
You want to give it another go, Gladian?
Gladian hesitated. He glanced at Type Null. No. Cookie and Gladian had been trying to remove Null's restraining helmet occasionally since the siblings' arrival. So far, Null resisted every individual attempt and had lashed out at the two several times. It was apologetic towards the two afterwards, nuzzling them affectionately, but Gladian had acquired quite a few more scars. Sitting around the table with a small tank in full flow, things felt somewhat normal. The TV was quiet, background noise. Then, suddenly, something caught their attention.
The president of the Aether Foundation has fallen ill after...
Feba had finished the device. The machine was incredibly large. It was designed to go over a person's head like an iron mask. It reminded Lucamine of the restraints designed for what would become known as Type Null. It was tall enough to comfortably fit the subject's whole head inside, and looking up into the top of the harness gave the president a lurch of sickness. Perhaps 100 horrifyingly long, dangerously sharp needles rested inside, to sink into the brain and cut out the imperfections. These were all attached to the individual machine arms neatly slotted away in the roof of the mask. And you're sure your inspiration for this was not some horror movie that just so happened to catch your interest? Lucamine asked, averting her eyes from the grim implements. Feba's laugh became a hawking cough. You've seen the plans, and this machine's purpose is scientific advancement, not torture, much like our goal. It looks like a butcher's tool. Lucamine spoke with contempt that would hide her concern. It looking so much like Type Null's mask was an omen to her. Feba had failed once before. He had better not fail this time, not when it felt like Sun was becoming hers. I can assure you, it's not. It had better not be. Lucamine had been a wreck for 11 days. After the slight hiccup in her mental state, that was her scrawling Sun's name over everything within her reach, she retired from the public eye, feigning illness. This had allowed her to scrawl Sun's name in peace. Sketchy, rash drawings of him were plastered across her bedroom floor. She hadn't woken him up again since. Feba had gone in to check on him and noticed he was quite skeletal, then realized he'd been 3 days without the IV drip in his arm sustaining him. Lucamine had been horrified to learn that another few hours would have killed him, and vowed to never put him at risk again. For real, this time. She satisfied herself by writing down words he had spoken, imagining his voice saying them, imagining his voice saying other things, things that made her quiver in excitement. She and Feba had prepared the slideshow of images to be displayed across the duration of the procedure, making sure to consider every little loophole, every individual thing that Sun didn't need in his memory anymore, every person of importance he could have met. In the digital age, it wasn't too difficult to source everything. They were both satisfied with the equipment and the method. Now it was time to put it into practice. Feba would take care of it all under the president's watchful and unforgiving gaze. She would not allow a single mistake to go unpunished. They carefully fit the headset with the screen built into it over Sun's eyes and restrained him further. He couldn't be allowed to move at all. A single slip could be fatal, or worse. Next came the precise work of cutting Sun's head open. This could be done while he was sleeping. Lusamine was so agitated by this step that Phoeba demanded she step outside. Reluctantly obeying, she pined for Sun from the room next door, another spare room for important guests. The two planned to use that as their control center for the operation. Once all was said and done, Sun lay with a heavy iron mask locked over his face and his mind completely exposed to the whims of the Aether Foundation. Lusamine gave the green light, and the work began. Sun woke in pitch blackness. His immediate hope was that he was dead. A blinding light pierced his eyes, which gradually he became accustomed to. Wherever he was, it was stuffy and the air tasted of rust. The light was a pure white screen. He must have some sort of headset on. That came with the realization that this was it. It was time. No sooner had that thought crossed his mind than his head exploded with agony unlike any other. His scream echoed inside whatever was on his head, bouncing it back to his ears and putting him on the verge of sensory overload as the pain somehow intensified further and further and further. He wasn't just strapped down anymore. They'd put a full straitjacket on him and rendered him completely immobile. His head was jammed into some sort of harness to completely hold it still. Individual points of fire made themselves known, but there were so many as to ignite his whole skull. A mechanical whirring registered from above as the screen turned green. The pain stopped. He breathed in and out. He was still himself. The image of the Kanto region appeared on the screen. Home, Sun thought about the towns, the cities, the Pokemon, the people. A whir from some spinelay gear above, a clicking macabre instruments together like claws, a swarm of locusts buzzing musically in sync, closer and closer. The nail dug into his soft tissue, found the connection, and severed it. Now the image of the region was alien. He didn't know what it was anymore. It was gone, like dust in the wind. The next image was of his house in the Howley outskirts. Had he told them where he lived while they beat him? Was his mother safe? Was, like a razor on stone, a scratching of something too rough, bloody knuckles, memory removed, redacted, rescinded, steel maggots wriggled in his head, eating. Sun had enough sense to know what was happening to him, even as the needles poured his brain for his thoughts about Iki Town. He had to stop himself from thinking what was on the screen, but bursts of memory came. They disapparated into nothing more than smoke, a fog that Sun's consciousness trailed through. The feeling of the tail spikes sliding into his vulnerable brain was like the feeling of a driving knife through a wet sponge. Nothing could be done for him. No way existed for him to resist. Memory, needle, gone. The whirring of the machine gave the impression of a dental clinic, one that had gone off the deep end wholly. Ilima, an accidental recollection of the Verdient Cavern trial, incisions on his mind, peeling away layers of his brain and ripping out memory. The list went on, covering what felt like every base, every location on Melma, Alka, and Yula Yula Island, every significant person he had met, the trial captains, the professor, Team Skull, everyone. Red ants crawling into his head, chomping out thought, chittering among themselves, and every time he tried to tell himself to think of something else, the machines whirring or the sound of his heavy breathing in the mass distracted him from the thought. When Hao appeared, an image of him from a photo in the Romton decks had snapped. Sun tried to think about about the taste of the Malsades Hal adored so much. The machine grinded, interested. First the thought of the taste was consumed, then the memory of Hal, then Hal himself was torn away. The screen went black for a moment. The ring stopped. It wasn't over though, was it? He still knew Lily, Gladian, and he was very much Sun, not what they wanted him to be. He was Sun. He lived in... His favorite color was... His name was Sun. His mother's name... His hometown was... His best friend was called... Sun was drowning. Sun was sinking into the deep void of his own head, being emptied. Sun felt more self-aware. Something was changing. Things felt tighter, and then his head was split open with an unbearable, unstoppable, inconceivable torture. The needles were deep in the jelly of his brain again, pumping as if raping any ideas of existence he could think of. The world shrunk into a pinpoint of blackness, where Sun was the only living thing, and whatever else existed did so to rend him apart with hypodermic teeth and scalding iron. His flesh was flayed, his ears burned in their sockets, his fingers snapped, and his ribs collapsed into his organs, puncturing his lungs and bursting his heart. He was full of blood, covered in it, swelling with it, but his body was still whole. Scenes of hyper-violence, ultra-violence, flashed on the screen, and he couldn't tell if they were truly there or if he was projecting his terrors onto the black. The sound of quiet, wet squelches slipped into his ears as the contraption fucked his head. It blended with rhythmic clicking, like the sound of Lucamine walking in her heels. Sun was sick as the image of her entered his mind. Thankful nothing was covering his mouth as the vomit spilled from inside the mask and onto the bed he was assuredly on. The needles paused and went back to surgical precision. Cut. Memories of Lucamine gone. No, memories of Lucamine being violent were gone. An image of Gladian quickly flashed up before Sun could comprehend his own mental state. A plunge of precise sword into his skull, and that was Gladian gone. Then Lily. No, he begged. It was impossible to stop. His whole life was already different from how he remembered it moments ago. He had forgotten so much in a minute that felt like eternity. Shoved in an oven and left to cook. An Iron Maiden closed on his mind, crushing it in a dark, agonizing grasp. Go, Nebby. Use splash. Oh, Sun. I was just pretending to be you. Nebby swirled around, trails of gas spilling behind its little stub arms, flailing frantically. Sun and Lily both laughed. Hands dug into broken glass, into pins and nails as the points sunk into flesh. The feeling of forgetting, torn out, a drill into organs. The pain was so strong it was abstract now. Sun was sick again. Hot, thick bile. He no longer had anything at all to remind him of who he was or why he was here. He dug deeper. Nothing. It was like he stood on a pier in the face of an unstoppable wave of fire. His name was Sun. His Sun. His name was Sun. Sun. He couldn't hold on. There was a second of a blackout. A second in which Sun shut down to protect himself from further mental damage. For all his remaining memories to form into a coherent narrative to his life. In that second, that vital moment where he shuffled what he knew, Sun's old life ended. There was too much changed for him to be the same person. His breathing echoed through the mental shape, heavy and fast. It felt like he'd been hit on the head a moment ago. The feeling of tightness over his body relaxed. In fact, everything was relaxing now. The screen was dim. The sun was floating, light-headed, smiling deliriously. In actuality, not much had changed in that brief moment. Faba had seen the blackout on his readings and had got ahead with the second part of the procedure. Now a cocktail of powerful mind-altering drugs was being fed into Sun's bloodstream. Ketamine, MDMA, and morphine were all present in the mixture in just below dangerously high amounts. Faba knew when to cut it off. Sun was basking in a feeling unlike anything he'd ever known. He was safe. He was happy. He was calm. He was also aroused. Words from some voice he didn't recognize resonated in his ears. Images were being displayed on the headset, but they were blurred, unfocused. It may have been minutes or an hour of this limitless pleasure. Sun's mouth hung open blankly as he reveled in the feeling of the moment. Tiny bursts of words registered properly, but he couldn't make sense of their meanings. The voice was feminine, he decided after a good while of thought. Now it was like she was speaking to him. He saw an image properly. A tall, beautiful woman reaching out to him as if to take his hand. She said his name, reminding him of what he was, or maybe she named him. Sun wanted to reply, to follow her into the light. The screen went dark, displaying the last image, a golden logo on a white background. The whispers continued even after the headset dimmed for the final time. Sun fell asleep, with the voice serenading him. Lusamine clapped her hands together with giddy excitement. She had been watching the readouts with a keen eye the whole time, and they had matched perfectly with the simulations Faba had predicted. Is he... Faba grumbled a little, words she couldn't make out.
Miss President, he'll need to be in an induced coma for another few days. The amount of mental damage he had just suffered cannot be underestimated, but yes, he is yours.
Faba spun in his chair around to face her, deactivating the apparatus.
Now that he's yours, you can clean him up while I fix his head.
I wonder, Faba began again, sarcasm in his voice.
I wonder why there was a team involved and type full project, whereas only the two of us worked on this. How do you intend to explain this to the rest of the Foundation?
Lusamine hadn't really considered that. She had just wanted Sun. I won't. They can believe whatever they want. Alola has no idea the boy is missing. Lily is too afraid to put it out in the news, and Gladian is too stubborn. The computer and readouts around it powered down as Faba raised into a hunched stand.
If that's all you think it'll take, who am I to question it?
Who indeed, Faba? Lusamine was already zoning in on Sun. They'd performed the procedure from the room adjacent, so Lusamine couldn't hear his pain, and so that Sun had no chance of associating one of them with the incident if he heard them discussing it as it happened. They moved out of the dark, makeshift theater and into the light where Sun was. Faba took the mask from Sun's head and looked up into the arrangement of needles. He approved, seeing the thin film of liquids on the blade.
This is why I hate children,
Faba hissed, scowling at the puddle of Sun's stomach fluid that had dripped down the mask and onto the bedsheets.
So messy.
Be quiet, Lusamine demanded. Fix him. Take your machine and leave, she demanded.
Oh, when I'm useful to you, I'm indispensable, he growled. But when I'm done, it's the same damn insults. One of these days, President.
Lusamine paused while carefully folding the sheets so the sick didn't spill. Is that a threat?
No, of course not.
Faba was insecure. There was a moment of silence for a short while as Faba closed up Sun's skull while Lusamine took the apparatus apart. When Faba was done, he grabbed an armful of equipment, loading it onto a nearby trolley he covered with a cloth.
I'll take this all away. The rest is for you,
Faba spat, and quickly ducked out of the room. Lusamine ignored the petty kick. Sun was sleeping with a faint smile, and made her smile too. Lusamine's joy at seeing him so peaceful quickly faded as she remembered she had to clean up the mess he had made. Sun, the things I do for you. So that was chapter 5. I love it. This is like my second or third time reading it, and I'm just like so struck by how well written the brainwashing scene is. It's like perfect in every way possible, honestly. For those of you that skipped the segment, it's basically exactly how it sounds. He was brainwashed, Sun was brainwashed by Lusamine and like the contraption that Faba made, and basically made to forget everything, like everyone he used to know, and only think about Lusamine and only know her. Yeah, I think that's really it. But I just love it so much. Obviously not the fact that he's getting, like, you know what I mean. Anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed this, and I'm probably going to post this the same day I post the previous chapter because, a little treat every once in a while is nice. So yeah,